Dr. Willow.
Hi, how is everyone today?
Last week we did a piece on sexual frustration when you can't find your own libido and your own drive. And this week we're focusing on sexual frustration when you've got a lot of drive and you're hungry, you're starving, you wish you were having more sexual connection than you are currently receiving. And
I think we've all been in that boat before. And it's very natural and normal, especially in long-term relationships, when you've been together for a long time, where one person is going to go into a sort of a period where they're not as sexual, they're not as, for whatever reason. There could be a myriad of reasons, but it does happen. It can leave the other person feeling like, ugh, I'm not satisfied. Like I'm not getting my needs met. I still want more. I'm still hungry for more.
Yeah, so I think one of the ways that we begin to bridge the gap between that feeling of starving, of neediness, of frustration, of even kind of blame, like what's wrong with my partner, of what's wrong, is it me? We get into these really crunchy, painful places when we're not being met sexually, and a lot of stories can arise. And if we can just sort of relax our nervous system for a moment, find the patience and the space to go, all right, well, if this is a long-term relationship and I'm in it for the long haul, that means there's space for us to ebb and flow, and there's space for us to be in different stages of our sexual expression. And can I make a little bit more space and really treat the experience like no one is misbehaving? Because when you are really pressuring your partner, blaming your partner, blaming yourself, these are not good conditions for a sexual attraction.
You're not going to be having good sex when you start to be like, I need you to make love to me more. Like that neediness and that pressure that you put on them and on the relationship, right? Because inside of any relationship, there are three entities. There's you, there's them, and then unity, the whole of you. And so you're putting a lot of pressure that does not, it's spaciousness that breeds pleasure. It's spaciousness that breeds intimacy. Pressure is the opposite.
Yes, and so we've got to change the conversation, because we also aren't suggesting that you don't talk about your needs, that you don't share your feelings, that you somehow don't matter and the other partner is the only one who matters, and we're always dealing with their time clock. There's a place in partnership. It's that third person in the relationship that you mentioned, Willow. It's you've got yourself, you've got your partner, and then you've got the needs of the partnership. What does the relationship most want? And oftentimes when you can take the focus off of yourself, me, and you attune to what does the relationship need, that's a beautiful meeting place. Because the partner that is feeling more shut down or maybe less connected to their libido has a place to go, what does the relationship need? How can I show up for the relationship? What do I need to be inspired to bring myself more fully to the partnership?
Yeah.
And same goes for the person who's feeling more hungry. There can be more patience. What does the relationship need? It needs more space. It needs more patience. It needs more generosity from me. It needs less pressure. Beautiful.
Yeah, I think when you can start to attend to that third person, really as a whole, think about it as a whole different person, a whole different soul. Could be even nice for you to do a vision board of like, what does it look like? What is this soul that is the union of us actually look like? Where is it at? What does it need? What is it, sometimes getting a visual can be really helpful. So you might, there's two ways to go. You could be self-focused, like I'm not good, or you could also be you are not. And so in either direction, you're gonna be doing a downward spiral. You're just, and if that's what's happening in a relationship, no shame, no guilt, no worries. Just take a pause, take a step back, take some space, and redirect your focus with your partner toward that third entity.
And this requires a mindset shift. And I think this can be the healing factor in the chasm between you and your partner regarding this issue, and that is to get curious. When you have a closed mindset, you're going to be more judgment focused. You're going to be looking for blame. You're going to be looking for fault. You're going to be looking for what's wrong, what needs to be fixed, and how to fix it. And it's going to be much more judgment, narrow focused. Whereas if you have an open mindset, your mindset is now going to be asking different kinds of questions, more curiosity questions. You're going to zoom out and see the bigger picture of the relationship, and your ability to be really inquisitive, like what's going on for you, honey? What's it like for you? And when you feel like I'm bringing stress or pressure to the sexual encounter, where do you feel that? And how could we do this differently? And with your partner being on the same page, they can also get curious about your experience. Babe, if you could have it all your way, what would our sex life look like? How frequently would we have sex? What kind of sex? What
How
sort of
long?
closeness does sex bring for you? And then you can start to pinpoint. Oftentimes it's less about sex, and it's more about connection, creating a feeling of belonging, having a place where we both get mutual relief from the tension and the stress of life. And what do we need to create in our environment for intimacy to feel more natural, more likely? What kind of schedule do we need to co-create so that you can arrive to our connection time stress-free with less pressure?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the biggest pieces that both Leah and I work with when we're working with couples. It's like, how can you create a container and a safe house for this relationship? You know, a place where this relationship can really flourish and breathe and blossom. And if, you know, sexual frustration's been going on for a long time for you, there's been dissatisfaction and, you know, not getting your needs met, there are also a myriad of ways that you can address that, you know, through self-pleasure, through opening relationship, through many other means. And we'll save all of that for next week. But this point Leah's making around staying curious, you know, really just wondering. It's about understanding. Intimacy is about understanding each other. It's about being vulnerable and pulling out the truth from your partner, because being vulnerable isn't something that most people are forthcoming with. It kind of needs to get pulled out a little bit. So when you create an environment that's safe for them to have that pulled out of them, then, oh my God, all this beauty can unfold. And that's going to create the intimacy. And maybe sex follows, maybe it doesn't. But that's the place where connection lives.
Yeah. Are you fostering the kind of environment in your relationship where your partner's desire is safe to be talked about, to be expressed, and to be explored? When we feel like someone is judging us because we're not as sexually active as maybe they would like us to be, we can turn that judgment back on them. Well, you're weird and you want too much and you're not getting it and you're not getting me and what you want is too much. You know, instead of just going, well, tell me about your desire. That doesn't obligate you to fulfill your partner's desire just because you're curious about their desire. In fact, when you can hold a safe place and make their desire, not shame their desire, but celebrate their desire, you'll notice that something inside of you begins to open. Your own desire can often come to the surface. And I think it's just really key that we start to realize that just because someone is naming what they most want, that does not obligate you to give it to them. You know, like it's so much better that that come from a place of generosity than a place of obligation. So just having the conversation about desire, having someone hold your desire as sacred, as important to them, that alone can be satisfying. That alone can be so fulfilling. You don't feel rejected, like your desire is not wanted.
That's right. Just being witnessed is really, I mean, all anyone really wants is to be acknowledged, to be seen, to be witnessed. And that goes a long way. And then maybe those desires never need to be fulfilled. Maybe they do, but that's the exploration. That's the curiosity. staying with that thread of curiosity. You don't have to go too far too fast. That's what we're always doing with sexuality, with so
Yeah.
many things in life. We're just always going too far too fast. Stay with the thread that you're on. Listen to your partner and listen to your own desires and listen to that unity between you as well.
That's a great point. Yeah, just slow it down. No one needs to be in a rush. And self-compassion, compassion for your partner, creating a sense and an attitude for generosity. Be generous with your assumptions. I think part of the closed mindset trap is that we assume we know what our
Right.
other partner is feeling and thinking. And most of the time, if not all the time, we're wrong. And if you can be generous with your assumptions, man, does that allow for a more honest relationship? This kind of compassionate space of like everyone gets to be who they are. And it's okay if you're both in different stages. There's different stages of how we express our sexuality. There are pause stages, there are healing stages, there's communication stages, there's medicine stages, there's spiritual stages, and there's discovery stages. And we might be in multiple stages at the same time. Your partner might be in a different stage than you. There's space for that. And it's really about your communication, allowing that space for everyone to be okay. Nobody's broken. And also remember, I know this is true in my partnership, we try to remember that our partner is reacting due to their conditioning. And your conditioning is like this automatic response. And it's all about, you know, the family you grew up in, the culture you grew up in, the rules that you grew up around,
The
all of
way
this
you
stuff.
protect yourself, your strategy patterns, all that stuff. Yeah.
All that stuff arises. And we just have to remember that our partner is not their conditioning.
Yeah.
And
That's
if they're reacting in a certain way, it's just a part of that's just their conditioning, but it's
yeah.
not who they are.
Exactly. So bringing that compassionate part of yourself forward, and just if you can take away your own story and your own conditioning, your own triggering, you know, if you
Yeah.
can step aside of your own stuff, then you can really see that they are in a point of confusion or in a point of pain, or just they need some healing. You know, they're in a different stage than you. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that your stages are going to align again someday. They will.
And I also want to like challenge the other partner who may have a lower libido than their partner, and perhaps their partner's libido kind of creates a little bit of stress and a feeling of blame for them, to just be able to sit back and distance themselves from that story and also challenge themselves. How can I show up for more intimacy in my partnership? Where is my partner right? What can I validate for them? And that doesn't mean that I self-abandon for their needs. Like Willow and I really believe strongly that we don't want either partner to self-abandon. You have to be self-responsible. So if you have more sexual desires, then you also need to be responsible for taking care of those desires for yourself in integrity with your relationship. And also, if you're the partner that often feels like there's pressure to be sexual when you're not as interested, two things need to happen. What can you do to challenge yourself to meet your partner in this intimate place? And also, what are the boundaries? What are you paying attention to your own nervous system? Can you provide more information that can support you getting more support from your partner? So there's a self-inquiry on both people's part that needs to be, you need to be responsible for that. You need to really take care of yourself and challenge yourself to show up even bigger.
Yeah, it's so
I'm
important. Huge.
being having been the partner who was always hungry, and now also having been the partner that was overwhelmed by not being able to meet the needs of a partner. I've been in both roles. I know how painful both roles are. And one of the things I've learned in my experience of not wanting sex as much is when I show up for intimacy, initially with resistance, or maybe even now to like, oh, I've got like 1,000 other things I could rather be doing. By the time our intimacy, sex, being sexual, having a practice is over, I never regret it. I don't go and go, oh my gosh, I totally wish I had done something else.
Shouldn't have done that.
No, I'm always like, God, why don't I do this more? This is so good for me. This is so good for us. Like, it's usually you're not going to come, like, you're going to be glad. You're going to be really happy that you invested that time.
Better.
Yeah.
All those endorphins, all the oxytocin, the rush that you get from the intimacy and the sexuality with your partner is never bad. It's always going to enhance every part of your life, not just your relationship, but every part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels good when you are on the same page with your partner, and that connection has a staying power. It calms them down and it lifts you up. And so remember that when you're in your own loop of I don't have time or I don't feel like it, to really consider what are the things that I can do so that I can feel like it. So I do show up with more enthusiasm. How can I remember this feeling of afterward and make a bridge to go when I'm in resistance, just remember how good it felt the last time.
Exactly. And, you know, things that can bring you back into energy for sexuality when you don't have it, when you're like, oh, I'd rather just take a nap or lay here and read this book, is breath work is huge. Movement is going to be huge. I mean, and also looking at your day and your calendar, like knowing, okay, my partner wants to get frisky later. I know they're going to want to. So, like, maybe I don't need to do these 3 extra things today. So I have some extra chi and some extra energy for my relationship, for that unity soul later on this evening. So start to kind of look at the whole picture of how you can meet your partner where they're at.
And as we kind of wind this live down, I mean, we could talk for hours and hours about this, and there's so many distinctions, you know, whether your partner's had sexual abuse and their nervous system has a trigger response and fight or flight and freeze. I mean, there's all sorts of components that can play into this dynamic. But one of the last points I just want to make is be willing to be influenced by your partner giving you some feedback. Don't be so stuck on this is the way I like to have sex. Be curious about what a type of approach needs to shift so that they can open around you instead of close around you. If you're coming too soon, too fast, with too much energy or too much friction, or going straight to primary erogenous zones when they need a slower approach or a more energetic sensitivity, ask some questions. Be willing to hear that. Try not to be so defensive that somehow they're saying something critical about you. It's really just, how can I show up in a way that opens them? Absolutely. Look at it from a different lens so that you can get that feedback and then make the sexual experience that much more enjoyable for both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. And, you know, it applies to every aspect of life, but apply it to your sexuality first. You know, that's a great place to start this practice of, it's really presence, you know, bringing that presence forward. And when you're really, truly present as you get into a sexual encounter with your partner, you're not having sex. You're not already in that, like, you know, actual sexual act. You're just in that space of breathing. And so staying with that as you go and not having the expectation that there's even going to be sex, right? So taking all expectations off the table.
Yeah, that's right.
Expectation. The pressure. Who needs that
pressure? Expectations are preconceived resentments.
Absolutely.
And so when you come with your expectations, it's already a setup.
Totally. Love that.
And so,
expectations are preconceived. What'd you say?
Pre- Expectations are preconceived resentments.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah. And so watch out for those sneaky little thoughts.
Yes,
And
no.
also, I think, like, I know for me, one of the things that's really helped is having a 5-minute rule. Like, if I can't shift my state, if I can't drop into a practice, then that's okay. I showed up. I was present. I breathed. I did my very best to like come into the connection. If I can't change my state and my mind is still so distracted, you know, a 5 to 10 minute rule, it can be really helpful. Or knowing that we're just going to do an intimacy practice and it doesn't have to lead to penetrative intercourse can also be a way to lessen the pressure and still create connection, which often ends up leading straight into full intercourse. But
Absolutely.
again, like, you got to watch out for those hidden agendas. You just
Yeah.
want to remember, if you're in a long-term relationship, you got time. There's time.
Plenty.
Yeah. Well, thanks,
So
Willow.
everyone, enjoy the rest of
Yeah.
your, what are we on? Thursday. And
Yeah.
we'll be back with you next week. As you can see, Leah and I can talk about this stuff for hours. And we will be as we start to roll out this amazing Sex Reimagined Summit that we're just doing incredible interviews for right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the podcast to follow. So lots more to tune into. And we're
Yeah.
grateful and honored to see you today. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Next week, we'll be talking about sexual frustration with your partner when they come before you do. And then that's like the sign that everything's over. So we'll be talking about how to navigate your climaxes and their climaxes.
How to get on the same train. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So until then, love, love, love.
See you soon.